Welcome to Morningstar. I'm Larissa Fernand, and I'm super excited to be talking to the Mohnish Pabrai, world-renowned author and investor, and founder and managing partner of Pabrai Investment Funds. Mohnish, thanks a million for your time. Thank you.
Larissa, it's a pleasure to be with you. I have a lot of admiration for Morningstar and everything you've done for individual investors. So it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Lovely. Okay, my first question to you is, when you look at investment, you bring this very analytical mindset to the table. I mean, you decide on particular criteria and on the first few hours whether a company even passes the test. So when you think in such structured terms, does it spill into your personal life? Do you introspect about relationships, how you relate to people? Do you overanalyze situations or conversations?
Well, I think people close to me have suggested and said that I have a very low emotional response to most events. Some of them wish the emotions were higher, but it's not something I can control. It is the way it is. I mean, all of us are hard coded in terms of who we are between our genetics and the first 5 or 6 years of life, our life experience in the first 5, 6 years. So, yeah, I mean, I became aware of this when others kind of put a mirror in front of me and said, so that is definitely an advantage in business and investing. Many times it's also an advantage in life, but it also has its disadvantages.
You once said, I was listening to a podcast where you said that earlier this year, that the world functions on trust and not contracts. So people do business with you because they trust you. And the best contracts are the ones you never look at once you sign. So clearly, you bring a lot of candor and integrity. Your standard is very high when you come into a relationship. What about arrogance? Does arrogance in people put you off?
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the I think, probably natural filters I use, and probably a lot of other humans use, is you know ego is a turn off. Arrogance is kind of a subset of ego, and yeah, so those types of traits, generally speaking, are a turn off. One of the things I learned a lot from is when I had the lunch with Buffett, I said to him, I said, Warren, you are an exceptional judge of humans. Were you always a great judge of humans? And he said to me that you're actually mistaken, Monish. I'm actually not that great at judging humans. He said, if you put me in a cocktail party with 100 people, and you gave me about 5 minutes to meet each person individually. And he said that I would probably be able to tell you that there were 4 people out of those 100 that were exceptional, wonderful people. And there were probably 4 people who were probably turnoffs, probably the arrogance, ego, and so on coming in. And the other 92, I probably wouldn't be able to form an opinion about. Then he went one step further. He said that what you ought to do is bring those 4 people who you were impressed with into your inner circle. And the other 96, just take them out. So basically, in effect, he was being a very harsh grader. He was grading the people that he couldn't tell the same way that he was grading the people who turned him off. And that is a very powerful mental model to use in life. It is a very unfair model to use because to a person who is in that 92, who may be a really good person, who you would go on to exclude, it's not fair to that person. But what happens is that by being a harsh grader, so if you take the perspective that there are an infinite number of humans on planet Earth, And if there are infinite number of humans on planet Earth, it means there's also infinite number or near infinite number of good people on planet Earth. So we don't pay a penalty for excluding a good person from our circle. We pay a big penalty for including a not so good person.
Wow.
And so basically by being a unfair, harsh grader, you get a huge advantage in life. And Buffett also says that, if you hang out with people better than you become better. And if you hang out with people worse than you become worse. So this heuristic and this mental model. When I meet people, when I meet people for the first time, the filter is pretty rigorous in the sense that if I uncover anything even minor that may be a concern for me, I'll just exclude the person, right? And the people who get included have to be just in that 5 minutes they just impress you so much and whatever. When I moved to Austin about close to 2 years back, I decided to I get a lot of requests from people who want to meet for lunch or coffee or whatever, and usually a lot of them get discarded just from the way what I know from the request. But some of them I said, okay, let's meet some of these folks and see what's going on. I think in the last almost 2 years, I must have met maybe 30 or so individuals one on one. Only one person became a very good friend, and I like to spend time with him. And the other 29 mostly went by the wayside. There might be one or two others who might be okay to hang out with. And it's not that they are bad people or anything. It's just that I was using Buffett's filter, where even if I couldn't tell, I moved with the decision to move on. It's a difficult mental model for most people because people want to be fair, but I think the fairness will get in the way of leading the best, being the best version of yourself.
So, what is the trait where you see in someone, whether it's someone you meet just like this or a promoter of a company, and you say, okay, I got to keep my distance?
Well, I mean, I would say ego becomes one part of it. You can tell, usually you can tell if someone is low ego or high ego. How do they treat people 3, 4 levels below them at the
Correct.
bottom of the totem pole? What are their friends like? What are their likes and dislikes, and how they kind of make decisions or different things that they choose to spend time on. So there's a lot of tells, and some of those things might be fine for the person. They may be good. They just may not be a fit for someone like me. And like I said, like Buffett said many times, we can't tell because people put up fronts, right? So it's not always possible in a short meeting to get past those fronts. But to the extent that you can, it can be really helpful.
I've also felt that a lot of times our personal experiences have a lot of impact on the way we see, we deal with money. So it could be you get married, then you have children, then you have turbulent relationships, then you make immense financial money. Then you may incur financial losses. Like you said, your parents lost money quite often when you were young. How does all this impact your idea of loss and risk? How has it evolved?
When I finished college, I got my degree in engineering, and I got a very good job as a software engineer. And my plan at that time was, when I was 22 and started working, was to stay at that company forever, hopefully get promoted along the ways, put 15% into my 401k retirement plan. And, I ran the numbers and I said that in 30 years or something, I would be set financially.
Yeah.
With the savings and all of that. And so that's the kind of the path I wanted, because I was trying to run away from the turbulence that I had seen with my parents. My dad was visiting me. I was living in Chicago at the time. My dad was visiting me. I was about little under 25 years old at the time. And he said to me, it's time for you to quit and start your own business. Right. And I said, well, I have no plans ever to do that. And if you recall, some of the experiences I had in childhood with all the gyrations I saw with you and all the different ups and downs of the businesses. And my father just brushed that aside. He said, "Oh, that's all. That's what makes life fun. It's just part of the great experience of living." And he said that basically your situation here is that whatever you do in this company, you will not see most of the reward of that because you're just one cog in a very big wheel. And you won't be able to exercise all your creativity and everything else because you'll be seen as a person who has a particular talent in a particular area, and that's about it. And I was myself at that time feeling I had joined this new group in this business, this company I work for. They had just started international sales and marketing. So they had a dominant US footprint. They were going overseas. And when I joined that group, it was 7 people. And their mandate was to get half the revenue of the company from overseas. The US side had about 1,500 people. And in about 3 years, that 7 people had gone to about 800 people. We had done an acquisition and grown a lot and so on. And what I had noticed is that my job description, which was doing everything when we were 7, kept getting narrower and narrower as we were at about 800. And I actually liked it better when it was 7 versus 800. And at the same time, my father was talking to me about, so I knew that I was not happy with the situation, even though it was a great company and they took great care of me and all of that. And so I worked on a startup on the side. And then once that got traction, I left. I think the experiences I had in childhood, I saw the flaw that my father had in his businesses, where he was really good as an entrepreneur in identifying opportunities and scaling them, but he was very aggressive, and the businesses were undercapitalized. So usually the first storm would just bankrupt the company. So I learned a lot from that experience, and I tried to build in much more resilience into the businesses than what I was doing. So I focused a lot on the downside while going for the upside. And so those experiences in childhood actually were very helpful to helping me navigate through that.
How did the GFC, the global financial crisis, impact the way you deal with loss? Because I think your portfolio dipped quite a bit during that time, if I'm not mistaken.
Just before the global financial crisis, my net worth in June of 2007 had peaked at 84 million, which was awesome.
Yeah.
And then I think at the absolute bottom, it had bottomed out at under 20 million. And there are worse problems in life than a 20 million net worth. So it wasn't the end of the world. But the area that it was having the greatest impact on me was that I had started the Dakshina Foundation. And I had we had agreed that we would give away 2% of our net worth every year to Dakshina, as long as the net worth was over 50 million. So it would give us at least $1 million a year going into Dakshina. And Dakshina was off to a very strong flying start in 2007. But when I got to late 2008 and early 2009, Dakshina was spending at that time around $1.5 million a year. It had a significant footprint. And there were no outside donors. I had been basically funding it. And I got very concerned that level of outflow, if my net worth never increased, would put things in peril. We had hundreds of kids who were preparing for the IIT exams and so on. So I had a joint venture with the government of India. So I went and spoke to them and I said, look, all these kids that we have in our program, we're going to fund the program and see them through their studies and IIT admissions and all of that. But we're not going to take another batch. We're not going to take a new batch in 2009. And the people in the Ministry of Human Resource Development, they understood my situation. They appreciated the candor. And they said, look, the government works with precedent. We've got a MOU and we've got a partnership with you. What we would recommend is that you reduce the scale of the program, but don't eliminate it because restarting will be hard. So we were taking about 400 kids a year at that time. And I took their advice. And in 2009, we took the smallest batch. We took this one batch of 50 kids, and which was still going to be some burden, but basically it would be like 150, 200,000, maybe $250,000 or something. And that was something I was comfortable with. It didn't impact me much because, I had a modest lifestyle, and whatever I was doing, there was no leverage in my life. So it didn't really make much difference to me. I could also see that the things that we owned, businesses that I had invested in, looked extremely cheap. And I was selling things at PE of 4 to buy things at PE of 2. Things were even cheaper. And so I could see that there was a decent chance that things would kind of bounce up from here. And the important thing I had learned, from my parents and all of that, was that I had no leverage in my, so I was poorer than I was 2 years back, but I didn't have any leverage, and so that was fine. And 2009, the markets bottomed out in March 2009. In the year 2009, Pabrai funds was up. The different funds were up between 110 and 130%. So by the time we got to the end of 2009, my net worth was almost double where we had bottomed. We were still below the 50 million. But then, we had several years of very strong performance after that because we were coming out of such lows. And then Dakshina was able to, in fact, the batch we took in 2010, the next year was a normal batch of 400. So we were back to normal and such. So it worked fine. I think in the end, I'm grateful for the advice from those guys in the ministry, and it worked out very well.
How do you view success? Because from every parameter, you're usually successful. How do you view success? How much of a role does money play in your idea of being a successful human being?
One of the things I realized in the last few years is Charlie Munger just passed away earlier this week. He was 99.9 years old. He was just about 1 month shy of his 100th birthday. And I developed a very good friendship with Charlie over the last 14 years. Very unlikely thing to happen, but it did happen. And I had many bridge games with him. I had many meals with him. I had many dinners at his place with him over the last 14 years. And I got to observe him in a very intimate setting, if you will. And one of the things I noticed that over time, when I looked at the way Charlie was, is that I saw that he didn't look back. So I would always bring up to Charlie that, Charlie, you look at the body of your work that you have done in your lifetime, and it is so immense and impressive. I mean, you're going to go down as one of the great historic figures of all time, and especially as a philosopher and an investor and so on. And he would always brush it off. And his focus would always be on whatever problem he was looking at in front of him. So Berkshire has been really successful, but he would moan and say, we have too much cash, we can't find investments, we're looking, things are so expensive. He would not spend time even wanting to talk about the past of Berkshire Hathaway or the past of Charlie Munger. Or he was also chairman of a company called the Daily Journal Corporation, and he was looking for a CEO successor for the Daily Journal. And he would moan and groan to me that he needs to find someone, he's not able to find someone, etc. So what I found is that all of his energies were focused on taking the next step forward. And they were not focused on looking back and saying, wow, I've covered a lot of distance behind me. Anyone else looking at Charlie would say, forget what's in front of you, the Daily Journal CEO or whatever else, or Berkshire's money. You dropped it today, it's fine. The history is so impressive, but that's not how he thought. And that's also not how Warren Buffett thinks. So I used to be I try to learn from that. So used to be like a lot of other, what is normal for humans is we look back, we did well at school, or we did well in a business, or we did well at my investment fund or whatever else, or Dakshana and so on, and say, oh, this is great. But I think that it's a better mental model to focus the energies going forward. So I don't think in terms of what is success. I think my dad was not a religious guy, but he had a area where he used to go and say his prayers in the morning. And he had a quote in that prayer area. It was in English. It said, success is not a summit or a peak. Anything you do can be done better. So the way I look at it is that I've been very lucky. A lot of luck, luck plays a big role in where we end up. Right place, right time, right people, etc. So there's a lot of luck involved in everything that happens in life, especially the good things that happen in life. And so my focus is more on how can what is the next problem or next milestone, and let's focus our energies on that.
Does anything make you insecure or give you sleepless nights?
I don't have any problems with sleep. I think one of my personality templates is that one is I don't have a high emotional response to a lot of things. Like, for example, in 2009, when we were at the bottom, and I wasn't so concerned about what was happening with me. I was more concerned with what was happening to my investors, because the funds were down like 65% from the peak. More than the index was down. The index was down about 40%. And my concern was, some of these people will exit. If they exit, I can never make it back for them. Thankfully, the exits were somewhat limited, which was good. One of the things I did at that time, which has served me very well, is that I created a spreadsheet of my portfolio, and I put down the current prices of everything, and I also put down what I thought those businesses were worth. And I spent more time thinking about what their values were versus what their market prices were. Many years back, I think when I was like 10 or 11 years back, 10 or 11 years old in my childhood, my father had gone bankrupt, and he was down to nothing. And there was this astrologer who used to show up at our home in Mumbai, in Bandra. And he used to be in these orange robes with a lot of like marks on his forehead and all of that. And he used to basically read my father's kind of horoscope and give him some thoughts on what he thought the future would be. And my father was an engineer. He was a very rational guy. So I went up to him quietly. I knew it was not the best time for him. I said, you have to know that whatever this person is saying is total nonsense. It has nothing to do with reality. And whatever he's telling you is not real. So my father said that, and I said, we don't have very much money, and every week you pay him when we have very few resources. So my father said that when I pay this guy and I tell him to come back the next week, he knows that he'll only be invited back the next week if he gives me a rosy forecast for the future. So he said, I'm at the bottom of a very deep well, and I need a rope to climb out of that well. And this weird astrologer with the orange robes, he's my rope. Because what I can do is I can suspend reality, and I can just, immerse myself into what he is saying will be reality in the future. And that is giving me the energy to look at what I can do next, what business I can start next, and, get on a recovery path, right? And in 2009, when I was, seeing this portfolio down and all this stuff, that spreadsheet became the rope. I spent more time looking at what the businesses should be worth than what the quoted values were. And that gradually helped me keep a sensible outlook. But I never really got depressed. It's just not the way I'm built. I'm grateful for that. It's not something I can control. On a day-to-day basis, everything was just fine. I had a roof over my head. We had good food to eat. Everything was fine. So there was nothing to really get panicked about.
Because you're a public figure, you're always in the limelight. And I see some people fawning over you, and some people are very acerbic, very critical. How do you stay mentally resilient in the face of all these expectations and comments? And
Warren Buffett talks about the inner scorecard and the outer scorecard, right? And in fact, when we met him for lunch, he said, would you like to be the greatest lover in the world and known as the worst? Or would you like to be the worst lover in the world and known as the greatest? And he said, if you know how to answer that question, you've got it all set. I noticed that sometimes I would interact with people and they would only have negative comments on people like Gandhi. So they would bring up all these negative things about Mahatma Gandhi. When I would try to tell them some positive things about Gandhi, they would brush it off and say, no, he's a very cunning man and he was this and that and all these things. So the way I look at it is that there are people who are very critical of Warren Buffett. There are people who are very critical of Charlie Munger. There are people who are very critical of Jesus Christ. There are people very critical of Mahatma Gandhi. So if they are critical of me, I'm very low life compared to all of these people. So the way I look at it is that if I can learn from the critics, that's great. But I try to focus on an inner scorecard, putting the chips where they are, and the good, bad, and ugly, basically looking at it from a holistic point of view. And so not thinking that I'm awesome and not thinking I'm the worst person, but trying to have a sense of reality. So external folks coming to me and fawning over or being critical doesn't have much impact. Either of them don't have much impact. I try to look at it from an internal point of view.
you know, the late American investor Julian Robertson of Tiger Management, he employed a psychoanalyst, Dr. Aaron Stern, to tell him how they looked at how people in his team looked at risk and how they worked together. So Stern used to like the sports guys because it made them very competitive at work. He also liked generalists, not the specialists, because they understood multitude angles to a story. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up is because decades ago, you employed two industrial psychologists to do a 360-degree analysis on you. And they did a bunch of tests on you. They interviewed your spouses, your friends, your employees, your colleagues, and they helped you fathom who you were on the outside vis-a-vis the inside. Now, here's my question to you. If you had to do the test today, how would you fare? Are you perfectly aligned who you are inside with the role and the image you project on the outside? Would you fare very well today?
Those guys were a godsend, and I think initiative that I went through cost me $2,000 then, probably one of the best $2,000 I spent. And I think now they do it, it's maybe north of 10,000, still a good deal. And such. But the mental map of who we are is hard coded at the age of 5 or 6, right? And so that's not going to change. That's from 6 to 60 to 96, it's going to stay the same. The further we are out of alignment from who we are on the inside, the less the degree of happiness we're going to have and less the degree of effectiveness we're going to have. So in an ideal situation, you want to lead like a kind of perfectly aligned life. And when I met them, it was more like this. It was misaligned, and their whole idea was try to get as aligned as possible. And I think there are some individuals we see who get to that perfect alignment. Because when you get to the perfect alignment, you can go through brick walls. I would say Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger are pretty darn close to being perfectly aligned. Probably people like Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, bunch of folks we see very strong alignments. Elon Musk, probably very aligned, internal, external alignment. Once they gave me the map of who I was, it made life a lot easier because I could see for the first time who I was on the inside. I think I'm much closer to alignment than I've probably ever been since 1999 when I went through that. So it's been like 24 years, and I've deliberately been trying in the last 24 years to move closer towards an alignment with the inner self. I still feel that I'm not there. I'm not. I'm not. I would say that probably I'm like, I was something like this, and maybe I'm more closer to somewhere here. There's still some misalignment, but that's what makes life fun for the future. So we can keep working on that. And yeah, I do believe that if I can ever get more closer to that, the payoffs are exponential.
Wow, I'm sure you'll get there. I'm sure of it.
Yeah, it's a fun journey. I enjoy the journey.
What makes you happy? That's my last question. What must happen in a day for you to say, what a happy day this was?
One of the things I try to do is I actually look back on things that I've done recently, and I ask myself, um, did I enjoy that? Was that fun? Or and so what I try to do is that when I like something, when I go and do something and I like it, I try to increase that in my life. And when I find something that I did that I didn't like, then I try to uh, push that down. So, for example, I've been playing bridge probably for like more than 35, maybe 36, 37 years, long time. And when the kids were younger, etc., bridge kind of took a backseat. A lot of family responsibilities and such. I used to go for a lot of bridge tournaments. In the 1980s, we didn't have online bridge, so I used to go for like live tournaments, and it was a lot of fun. I mean, I was single, and I could go for 3 days to Michigan and play a bridge tournament, etc. It was a lot of fun. And recently, I got back. So I got back into online bridge, and then more recently, I decided that I'm going to increase my time for playing bridge live at tournaments, because I'm a math guy. I like to play games. These are kind of fun things to do. And I spent like 4 or 5 days this summer in Chicago, playing bridge, like pretty much, morning till evening. And I hadn't done that in a long time in a live setting. I hadn't done that in probably 15, 20 years. And I enjoyed that experience. I just went for another tournament to Atlanta, 4 or 5 days, and again did that. But I realized that while I enjoyed those experiences, I could improve them. One of the things I'm going to change is that I want to keep learning and getting better at bridge. So I need to play with people who are much better than me. The last 2 times I played in Chicago and Atlanta, I played with people who were maybe at my level or a little lower. So I could see that if I make that change, that will increase the euphoria on playing bridge. So I think the next national tournament is in Louisville, Kentucky in March. So I want to go for that, but I'll only go for that if I can figure out the partners and team that I can be part of. So basically, I just look at things I do and the degree of enjoyment I have. And if I meet someone, I really like it, I'll try to increase the interaction with that person. If I go to a place for dinner and I really like that, I'll try to increase the times I like to go there. So the foods I like to eat, the people I like to be with, the activities I like to do, in all these cases, I'm trying to increase happiness. And I think I've been so deliberate about this for so many decades that life is very blissful.
Lovely. Very few have that privilege. Very few have that. Yeah.
But I think it's not that hard for a lot of people because, the best things in life are free. Happiness doesn't correlate very much with wealth. Once you get past a certain base level that you've got, a roof over your head and all of that. And so if people just spent more time thinking about what would make them happier, I think they would take some deliberate actions on that. They would get there. Absolutely.
Lovely. Talking to you has made me happier.
All right. That's great. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Made my day.
Yeah. But Mohnish, thanks a million for your time. I enjoyed every single moment. Thank you.
Likewise. And actually, I have to say, Larissa, that You hit the ball out of the park. No one's asked me any of these questions before, and it made it a lot of fun for me. So thank you very much. I think you did a lot of work to get there, so I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, this is Larissa for Morningstar. Thank you for watching.